but we had when we went out through the procurement process with DOAS's help to bid out our voter registration system that we did that's been 4 years ago now, and then same thing on our corporations process. Part of what we wanted to do in those RFPs was to do apps and have the filings where it wouldn't just be online, that you could actually do it through your phone. So it's our vendor that has actually built that, but they work hand in hand, obviously, with our IT division and our legal team too, to make sure that we're recreating everything the way the law and the code says and how things are supposed to operate.
Okay, I was just curious. You mentioned an app, and I just wondered if that was something. It was actually an app where you just one of those things where you go in and just fill in.
Well, what we did originally, we had the GA Votes app, which was where we started with the voter registration system. So we had the online voter registration on there. We had the sample ballot, find your polling location, military can track, their absentee ballot. And then when we got the new corporation system, we knew eventually we wanted to include some of those, the well-used corporation functions that we have. So that's why we've moved from the GA Votes app to now you search for it under GA SOS.
Yeah.
So you have the 4 elections functions, and then you have the 4 most used functions in the corporations division, which is the one-click annual registration, the express annual registration, doing a business search, and then also ordering a certificate of existence. So any banker, attorneys, and just the corporate owners or members of LLCs, that's what they're doing every day, is trying to search entities or what have you. And it's really worked great. I had a police chief that had an old LLC that called me yesterday and couldn't find it, and I was on the road, and when I got to the girls' basketball game last night, I was able to just pull up his entity on the phone. I screenshotted him a thing where it had actually been administratively dissolved back in 2011. But it was a quick way. I mean, had he had the app, he could have done that all himself. So
yeah, I think it's great. I was just curious about it. Thank you.
All right, quick question regarding the audit about the identity protection contracts from last year. Is your office still engaged in those contracts?
So, no, I don't believe. You're talking about the Deloitte?
Yes.
No, they've completed all that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, well, very good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you again for allowing me to go early so I can make this other commitment that could potentially affect the Crawford County line. So, no.
If you happen to speak to our friend John Merrill before I do, please tell him I said hello.
I will. Thank you. Good luck this year.
All right, next up is I can't even say GEMA anymore, can I? I can.
We're going back.
It's the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency.
Thank you very much.
And we are so proud to have you here in front of us.
Pleasure to be here.
Congratulations.
It truly is, and I hope everyone on the committee had a great holiday and look forward to working with you during the session. And before we begin, please know that you have an open invitation to come out to our facility off Confederate and look at what we do, and we can get you around the state and talk about some of the things we're involved in, the things that we do too. So thank you for that and appreciate your service. I didn't really know how to start, but next year, if you have any issues with how to design a Christmas card, the chair is sort of outdone herself with that. And one of the interesting things that I ran across in her card is she just celebrated 10 years here in the legislature. And I went back and looked, and it's been almost 10 years since GEMA has been before this committee. So thank you for that. It's a pleasure to be here, and we hope we'll have an invitation to come back because we're proud of what we do, and we certainly want to share with you what we do for the state, and we also want to make sure you know that if there's any issues, please reach out to us, and we'll be glad to work on those. Since it's been so long, And there's been a lot of turnover, actually, in the leadership at GEMA Homeland Security. I wanted to introduce a few folks to you, and I'm going to do it by seniority. Seporia McMillan, she is over our financial division, and she's been with the agency for 16 years, former OPB. I think next in tenure is Catherine Howden. She's our Senior Policy and Strategic Communications Director with 18 whole months experience. And then we have Harlan Prevost, who is our Deputy Director of Homeland Security, and Harlan's been with the agency for a year and 4 months. And Thomas Moore. Thomas is our Deputy Director of Emergency Management, and he's been with the agency 7 months. And I've been there a month and 4 days. And so for us, it's a great opportunity to sort of look at how the agency has done business and look at ways that we can improve and provide a better product to the taxpayers of the state, because, you know, our mission is basically to serve and protect. Sort of as the Secretary of State mentioned, our second slide is we have a flat budget request, so there's nothing there additional with that. And we also have no agency-sponsored legislation this session, so that takes care of that. But I imagine we'll be down a good bit. The next page sort of shows what Georgia spends per capita for emergency management versus other states in the southeast, and I just put that in just to for information for you, so you can see sort of how we stack up. And as a taxpayer, I can tell you I'm pretty proud that we're a very fiscally conservative state. It's something that I think we should all be proud of. And while we've done it on a very lean budget, I would say that the agency is comparable to anybody else in the Southeast, and I think it's something that we can all be proud of. Our mission at GEMA Homeland Security is to facilitate the protection of life and property against man-made and natural disasters by directing the state's efforts in the areas of prevention, preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. That's a mouthful. The simple lay version of that is we're here to help. We're here to help at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And if you have constituents that have issues, tornadoes in southwest Georgia, just the night before last, so we were dealing with that yesterday. If you get those calls from those folks down there, please forward them to us. So we're going to work very aggressively over the next few years and trying to educate and help some of those emergency management directors in those rural counties on the process of how you actually request help. And I think that's good for us, and I think it'll be good for you too, and maybe cut down on how many calls you get from mayors, but may not. We'll just see. We have 117 employees at GEMA. So when we have a disaster in the state, you're not going to see a convoy of GEMA semis and bulldozers and trucks coming down the interstate. What we really do is coordination with the other state entities, and we have a great partnership in our state. I think it's what makes us very unique compared to many of the other states that surround us. In my prior life with the Department of Natural Resources, I've gone to other states during emergencies, and I've seen how they've operated, and I can tell you the relationship between the agencies in Georgia is head and shoulders above anything I've seen anywhere else, and I think that's why we're so successful here. Our next slide explains sort of how we're organized, and we call it the NASCAR slide because it's all our sponsors, so to speak. We operate off a Georgia Emergency Operations Plan, and in that plan there are 15 emergency support functions. Each one of those functions has primary state agencies assigned to be responsible for that function when the need arises. And in addition to those primary state agencies, there's also secondary state agencies that assist with those too. You'll look through here, you won't see the Department of Corrections. It's because they're not primary on any one of these functions. But I can tell you they're critical to what we do and the services that they provide. Just with the tornadoes recently, they've got inmate chainsaw crews down there working here, helping to clear roads. Just a month ago, we had inmate firefighter crews in North Georgia working hand in hand with the Georgia Forestry Commission on combating those forest fires. Of ours. They're just not one of our primary agencies, but they are secondary, and almost all state agencies have some role to play in emergency management. Next slide. Talk a little bit about Hurricane Matthew, since that's the most recent thing of really big event that we've had in our state. This was a very large, diverse operational response, and we're doing after-action reports looking at what we did well and what we can improve on, and I'm not going to dwell on what we did well. That's great. What we're going to dwell on is areas that we can improve, and we've noted several areas that we can improve there. Communication. I've always said every agency that I've ever been, if you can hire a expert from out of town with a briefcase, and he's going to come in and he's going to tell you your problem is lack of communication, because it's almost always the issue. It's an issue internally with agencies, and it's an issue externally too. And for us, it's really huge, because we really partner with everybody. And so we have to really work on that communication piece and develop those relationships between the state, the county, and local officials, and the federal officials too. There were some issues with the coordination of shelter operations during Matthew. I'm already working with public health, looking at those issues. We're going to meet with the Red Cross and talk about those issues and see if we can't have a little more streamlined approach to how we get those shelters stood up when the need is identified, and get the supplies in those shelters that we need. A little bit too much bureaucracy associated with that, and we're going to see if we can kind of streamline that and make it work more effective. Lastly, synchronization with the state agencies, the county EMAs, and private sector partners regarding long-term care facilities and hospital evacuation protocols. Big concern with hurricanes is nursing homes and hospitals. How do you evacuate? There's plans in place. The reality is some institutions have done very good jobs of keeping those plans up to date and have true working plans. Others just have a document on a shelf in an office, and we're going to try to ensure that everyone has a working plan that we can move forward with. Money. It always boils down to money. No one knows that better than y'all. The damage caused by Matthew in Georgia, individuals and families are slated to receive $11.5 million in grants. Local government and some specific private non-for-profit organizations are slated to receive an estimated $87.5 million for project funds. And businesses and families are receiving over $7 million from the Small Business Administration loans. So there's a $106 million coming to the state of Georgia to help offset some of the damages and issues caused by Matthew. And in addition to that, we're working with a hazard mitigation grant program to hopefully be able to identify and receive $20.7 million. This is what we're looking at now. for the state and for local governments to implement long-term hazard mitigations after a major disaster. That's emergency management. There's really two hats in GEMA Homeland Security. One is emergency management, and the other one is Homeland Security. Homeland Security, I'm not going to read through all of the things that we're involved with, just to know that everything from terrorism to fire, medical, explosive, hazard materials, biological, radiological, nuclear, we're involved with, and we work with multiple agencies on a daily basis with. There's basically two grants that are funneled through GEMA related to Homeland Security. The first one is the State Homeland Security Program, and the second one is an Urban Area Security Initiative. These are 80% passed through to the locals and 20% for the state. These funds a number of years ago were much greater than they are today. And these funds have built out a lot of the capacity that we have in the state to respond to disasters, whether they're man-made or natural. Those fund dollars have decreased the last few years, and we're receiving enough grant monies now to pretty well sustain what we have in place. We don't have a lot of options currently to be building out more. And so that's sort of a quick version of who we are and what we do, and be glad to answer any questions.
We do have some questions. Chairman Smith.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, and it's great to see you here. What other agencies are you going to serve in before you retire? I'm just curious.
You will need to ask the governor.
I will definitely do that. Yeah. So on your budget page, in the title Federal Funds and Grants, the 29, almost 30 million, compared to our state funds. I'm just curious, is that just a matching number there? Is it a variable every year, or what is that? What makes up the 29, almost 30 million?
Support you.
Good morning.
You can see my 1 month, 4 days here. Come on.
That 29 million is a multiple grant programs. Most of it that we load up front is from our public assistance grant program, which brings in the federal funds for recovery when we have disasters. And then he mentioned the hazard mitigation grant program is to build up and to prevent the damage that comes for future disasters. So that's mainly what we're loading up front, and some Homeland Security funds. But in October, we began getting additional grants, and so by the time we finish up the year, we have a whole bunch more loaded, but we start with at least 29 to 30 million up front.
Thank you. Further questions?
Sure.
So then, I'm curious, so the way you would plan and budget your year is based just on your state funds, and your employees are that way, and then you see what you can, then you respond to the emergencies with this other funding? I'm trying to figure out how variable that number is. So it is variable.
It is variable, yes, ma'am. One of our main operating grants is our Emergency Management Performance Grant.
Okay.
It funds probably about 60 to 70% of our operations annually. And
Okay.
it's about 9.1 million.
So that's almost a fixed number then, or close to it, you can look at?
Yes, ma'am. Over the last maybe 3 to 5 years, it's been fixed.
Okay,
And
thank you.
And as Chair of Natural Resources, I'm sure you're familiar with the funding that comes through DNR, and where they use funding to offset operational costs and personnel costs. It's very similar at GEMA Homeland Security like it is at DNR.
Okay, thank you.
So if we have a federal disaster and money funnels from the feds, does it go directly through your agency or to the Treasury and then to your agency?
It goes to our agency.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chair Lady. My first question anyway, I think I may have the wrong agency here, but that group, I don't know what they're called. It's a uniform group that it's a voluntary uniform group that works with.
The National Guard?
No, not the National Guard. There's another state agency that's not the National Guard, but they.
State Defense Force?
That's it. Is that under you all or the Department of?
They're one of the entities that we partner with disasters, and we call on them for assistance. Yes, sir.
Who? Can't even get it out.
DOD.
Who are they actually under? Who
Department
is-
of Defense.
Department of Defense.
Okay, I was thinking maybe it was under you guys. I didn't know if they made you a general or.
No, that's under.
Along with your other duties. That was it. I just had some questions about, any expenses that are related to that, but it's not yours, so thank you.
Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Chairman. During our study committee, Chairman Parsons and I heard about this FirstNet communication program that the federal government is implementing. Are you familiar with that? Could you tell us a little, is that going to be through your agency, or how's that FirstNet?
It will be through our agency. The reality is, I don't know how far off the ground it's truly gotten at this point. It's something that internally we have talked about and that we need to pursue and sort of see where that is.
So you're not making plans. My question was, are you a state going to have to put money in? It sounds like a huge cost that federal government is tackling, and I was just. And it's going statewide through all agencies, I heard, or something.
It is, and the state's going to have to come to a period where we're going to opt in or opt out.
That's right.
They're making it where it's going to be impossible to opt out. Really, it's not going to be fiscally capable of opting out. They've kind of been put on the back burner a little bit. It's been prolonged because they're under a lawsuit now from one of the carriers that was possibly going to be involved in that, has been eliminated, and now they're suing the federal government. So it's kind of prolonged the program, but we do have staff members that are actively involved in tracking that program. So we will come to a period where we're going to have to make the determination whether to opt in or opt out.
Okay, thank
And
you.
it's going to be expensive.
Yeah, I see it.
But it's going to be beneficial because it's going to be inoperable, for communications and public safety.
Could I ask one more question?
Sure.
I don't want to prolong. I was talking to Representative Green yesterday with some storms down there, and I heard you say y'all are dealing with a thing. What's the first thing you do when you deal with a disaster like that, or storms, or tornado, whatever it might be? What is it all through your local EMA directors?
It is. Ideally, that's the way the system is set up and designed, and if we can get those communities to use that process, then it enables us to get resources on the way to them or to them much faster. And it seems to be, I think it's more of an education and
And that's what I was going to say. I think a lot of our rural counties that have maybe one part-time person or one person that's maybe not as trained or got the experience as some places. I'd really urge you to try to work with some of these smaller counties and get those directors up to speed on things.
Well, one of the things that I've seen in my short tenure there already is that we need a much more robust outreach program, training program, and it's in a number of different areas. A lot of it's related to emergency management and the processes that you actually apply and request assistance. But part of it also goes to Homeland Security, and I think we need to be sort of educating the public on things that they should be looking at and that would be considered suspicious, and where do you report those and what do we do with those. So there's two things there that I really think that I see as something that'll bring a lot of benefit to us in the future that we're going to be looking at over the next couple of months.
I mean,
No.
thank you.
Sure. Representative Barr, sorry.
Thank you, sir. Kind of a follow-up on that question, under the NASCAR slide here. I was able to go up and visit with some of the fellows on the front line of the fire. And just kind of curious, as trying to put all this together, what is y'all's function, kind of as far as that goes, when you have, the Georgia Forestry Commission, the DNR, all those guys working together? Do y'all umbrella that? How does that operationally look like?
Operationally, Georgia Forestry Commission has operational control of that, and we're there to assist and help coordinate. And what we did in relation to that is they're busy fighting fire. They've got enough on their plate that they don't need to be worried about trying to find additional resources, and that's where we can come in. Gotcha. And we reached out to the Department of Natural Resources. We reached out to Corrections. I was still at Corrections at the time, actually, but that's how those resources got there to assist forestry. Gotcha. And sort of in addition to that, we're actually, forestry is working now with Corrections, and we've got a program in place. They've done one session already down at the prison in Reedsville, and we're scheduling some more. But the concern is, and I know I'm going to talk about a drought while it's been raining for 3 days, but when the drought was so prevalent and you had the fires going in North Georgia, the real concern was it's really not even fire season yet. So if we continue with this dry weather and we really get into fire season, forestry is really concerned about the capacity that they have to manage that. And so Corrections and Forestry has partnered together, and we're training inmates now in wildlife firefighting certification. So they'll actually have a certification and skill when they come out of the system that they can potentially receive a job with.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That helps y'all, kind of the conduit, put those together. Yep. Excellent. And the slide here on the per capita, that's phenomenal. Great work. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Any other questions by members? Okay, thank you. All right, our former colleague, Lynn Riley, our Commissioner of Department of Revenue, will be next in our last meeting or hearing for the day. Good morning. Ready when you are.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having us today to talk about the activities of the Department of Revenue. I have with me to my right Becky East, our CFO of the agency, and to my left Ken Nash, our Finance Director. And we will attempt to answer any questions that you bring before us. You're getting some handouts that we'll refer to as we make comments, and then be happy to answer whatever questions we possibly can. The first and the largest document is our annual report, and this is primarily just for reference today to give you some factual background on the different workings of the department. But what I'd really like to focus on are the two individual sheet handouts that we presented to you. The budget summary, I'll start there and talk about the funding that we've been grateful to receive year over year from the General Assembly. And if you look at the total line for FY15, and then moving across to the FY16 original, amended, final, and then our actual expenditures, you'll see that we have remained relatively flat in the appropriations that we've received for the services that we provide. The fluctuation that you'll see primarily there are the Forest Land Protection Grant dollars that are provided to us on an annual basis. And for the amended FY17, the only activity that we would anticipate, other than, and I'll speak to motor vehicle in a moment, would potentially be the funding of additional forest land protection grants. And in that case, that's purely a pass-through. We receive that money from you folks, and then that's allocated out to the counties based on the applications that they provide to us, and that we verify and then distribute accordingly on first come, first serve. And if you look at the second page that we handed out to you, you can see the utilization of the forest land protection grant monies that you have appropriated year over year since the inception of the FLPA program. And you could make note of the fact that currently we have applications for over $41 million pending from the local governments across the state of Georgia. So any funding that is provided to us in the amended 17 budget will quickly go out the door based on the $7 million that is still pending for calendar year 15 and over $33 million of funds that have been applications presented for forest land grants for the calendar year 2016. Our efforts have been primarily focused over the past year in protecting the taxpayer and providing equitable and efficient services. The one area that we have consistently sought funding either during the appropriations process for the amended fiscal budgets or the annual fiscal budget is growth and demand for the services that we provide. The motor vehicles division is an area where we see most indicative the outcomes of the growing economy here in the state of Georgia. As more and more people prosper and move to our great state, more and more vehicles are registered. And year over year, with that growth in vehicle registration becomes the demand for our services in registration, tag and titling, and the production and distribution of the tags for vehicles. So we have, in past sessions, been appropriated additional funding to meet that demand, and we anticipate that we will need some additional funding in amended FY17 and fiscal 18 for that continued growth in motor vehicle registrations in the state. For FY18, our primary project outside of tax processing and motor vehicle registrations is our drives project. That will be our kickoff year, we anticipate, of the multi-agency initiative that will produce a web-based motor vehicle tag and titling function in conjunction with a electronic driver's licensing function with the Department of Driver Services in conjunction with Georgia Technology Association that is going to be working with us as we bring on this new web-based format. We will be slowly gearing down, if you will, our current Gratis system, which is a mainframe-based computer program. But we will likely in FY18 and potentially in FY19 be running parallel systems. As we bring our new drives program online, we are going to do it county by county. We see value in not flipping the switch on 159 counties' connectivity with the state on over 9 million motor vehicles annual renewals. So we will be doing it on a county by county rollout over 24 months. So we will be looking for additional assistance on operational funding for dual systems for a short period of time as we ramp one up and ramp the other down. That's really all I have prepared to discuss with you today, but I stand open for questions on any of the activities that we're overseeing at the department and look forward to some continued positive outcomes for our taxpayers in Georgia. So, Madam Chair, I'll stand ready for any questions.
Right. Our first question comes from Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and so good to see you, Commissioner. It's been too long. We miss you in the House still.
It's a pleasure to see you today, too, Mr. Chairman.
You mentioned about the tags. That's roughly 2018, I understand, or 19, that might be coming web-based, so you can get your tag. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. The other question was, with the vehicle tag tax, when we changed legislation a few years ago, now that we've had time to rotate through this in a couple of years, is the tax actually up or down as far as revenue for the state?
For the state, the revenues are up, and that's indicative of the formula that was put into the TAVT legislation that provides for now at a 7% TAVT fee that is assessed on the acquisition and titling of a new vehicle or a used vehicle.
And that money goes into the treasury, and then we have to allocate you money through the budget. Is that correct?
Well, that TAVT is actually collected at the local level. When you register your vehicle at your local county, that amount is collected and then remitted to the state portion is remitted to the state.
But it goes into our treasury, and then you get allocated. So you don't gain any dollars to your agency through that increase. Is what I'm trying to get across.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And can you tell me how much it's up, roughly?
I don't have it.
Okay, and the second question would be then, how much is it up for individual counties or down?
And that's.
Is that something you get to me later? That's fine.
But I was gonna ask, is there a way do you have that number to where we can see where each county either benefits or loses?
We are performing that calculation right now.
That would be great.
Because the department is required to adjust that distribution allocation on an annual basis. We were waiting for the final 2016 numbers to come in, and our team are evaluating that because we, in the next week or two, will need to release the 2017 apportionment rate. We are currently at a roughly 60% of the TAVT fee stays with the state, and 40% is distributed at the local government level between the cities, county, and Board of Education. In 2017, we will evaluate the revenues for 2016 and adjust that rate based on the formula that was included in the 2012 legislation.
Is there any way you could do that even in the last 2 years? It's been in effect for 2 years, correct?
Yeah, we do have that data. I apologize that I don't have it
That's
here
okay.
specifically.
We're anxious to get it, though.
But we'll be happy to provide 2014, 15, and 16. We can easily provide you the total amount the state received and the amounts distributed out to the counties.
Wonderful. Actually, could you even show us 13 and 12 the way that we used to do it? Is that an option also?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Since we changed on March of 2013, 2012 would reflect the old birthday tax, ad valorem collections at the local level, and sales tax. And then in 2013, you would see the migration as the ad valorem collections start to decline. The sales tax is effectively eliminated, and the TAVT goes into effect. And yes, we'd be happy to do that. And you're looking for county by county totals.
That would be wonderful.
Per year.
I'm sure, like me, my counties and schools are telling me that they're getting less dollars on that plan, and I'd love to see the hard numbers. And continue on if you'd like.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, did I drop you? I'm sorry.
I have one other question, if you don't mind. That kind of shows my ignorance. But at one time when we were going through this legislation, a part of that legislation was actually said that if a county came up short, that the state would make them whole. Did that get cut out, or is that still in there? And if it is, are we doing that?
That is still in there. That was part of the formulaic calculation. And the department uses that benchmark, that baseline for the year 2012 to determine the apportionment of subsequent years' distributions.
So I don't understand how any county could come up with less. That was my point. If the state's doing what they said they were going to do. But
the outcome is that each county may have a different outcome than the aggregate of 159 counties. The legislation contemplated the calculations being used on a statewide level for county collections.
Not per county?
Not per county.
Interesting.
So there could be circumstances where certain counties may be outperforming that 2012
It sounds
benchmark.
like I got snowed again. Thank you. Okay. We'll get into that later, but I do appreciate the information when you can make it available.
Thank you. We'll have that produced and distributed to the chair lady for distribution to you as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you. Representative Barr.
Thank you, ma'am. Good to see you. Would you just briefly talk about the litigation and investigations line? It looks like we're going up. Are we adding some investigators? That's on the Department Revenue Budget Summary, FY16 over 17.
Yes, I think what you're seeing is that on the bottom line, fraud protection and prevention, you see has gone away.
Okay.
That number is now reflected up in litigations and investigation.
Gotcha. Okay.
In prior years, it had been separately stated on the budget reports, and now it is included in that division.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And nice to see you again.
And you as
Sharon,
well.
Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. You as well.
So the gratis program had a lot of faults to it, and just when we tried to implement it, et cetera. So moving to this new shared program, you think will produce a clearer picture of revenue that we're bringing in and easier for our counties to use?
It will absolutely be more versatile for the counties as well as the individual motor vehicle owner. The ability to not have to leave your home to do all of your annual renewals and registrations and be able to get a driver's license renewal as well. It'll be something that is as simple as what you use. There will be apps for your portable devices as well as functions on the system that will allow you much more user-friendly experiences.
Thank you. And then, Madam Chair, may I ask? I'm getting phone calls from constituents who have moved in, and they're shocked by the sticker shock that they get when they are informed how much they have to pay. Can you give a little insight into that? And it's just a one-time, somebody had to pay $5,000 is where I'm going with this. And, so how do I explain that? Or what did we do as legislators that could be simpler or fairer to these people?
The TAVT is assessed when you register your vehicle and receive a new title, and that would occur whether you're moving into the state, and the state law requires that you do that within 30 days of becoming a citizen of the state of Georgia. The legislation in 2012 that created the TAVT program did not contemplate any carve-outs. Every new registration is subject to a TAVT calculation.
All right, thank you. I don't know if y'all have heard from people like that, but I've heard. So,
Welcome to Georgia. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, welcome to Georgia, WAP. Try the lottery, right? One final question, and some fraud was brought to my attention in my part of the state, and so I was able to contact your office and give you information. The ones who reported to me were protected anonymously, and your investigations took place from there. Could you explain for our committee a role we could play as legislators when we get these types of calls and what to do? This was, it was hidden under the umbrella of a church, so it was quite something. And if you could explain a little bit how you go after these fraudulent and how you protect the ones who report it.
Absolutely. We have a fraud hotline. We also will accept anonymous faxes and phone calls and emails. We will always protect the identity not only of every taxpayer in the state of Georgia, but the identity of anyone who is reporting to us their concerns about another taxpayer. Our Office of Special Investigations will immediately look into the situation and perform whatever additional functions that are necessary, whether it's to get local law enforcement involved. If there is evidence of criminal activity, then they will work with the local district attorneys to prosecute. One caveat that I will make very clear is that anything that is reported to the department, we are prohibited from sharing the result of our investigation because, of course, that taxpayer that may be being looked at, their rights are protected under the confidentiality statutes. So if someone called and was saying that they wanted to tell us about a circumstance, we would happily take that information, but there would certainly not be any follow-up reporting outcome. The only evidence that might be of actions taken would be something that was publicly done through an indictment or other public safety activity.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
But on the same note of that question, if you have someone who's seeking revenge, let's say, on someone and decides to use your department as a reason to do that, how is that addressed, or is it at all?
Well, again, we would look at each individual taxpayer based on the circumstances of the situation. And if they are fully compliant with the tax laws of Georgia, then we would have no finding. If there was something that caused concern, whether it was an underpayment of any particular tax type, the department's compliance division would reach out to that taxpayer. If there was evidence of some type of criminal activity, whether it would be in the non-payment of taxes or odometer tampering, title and registration fraud, that's when our special investigation unit would get involved.
Do you ever have those who claim that someone is in default somehow? Do you have regular callers who do that? I'm just curious at this point, since you brought it up. I'm going to ask more questions. But
I say confidentiality would prohibit me from being able to answer that question. But we take the calls that we receive seriously, and we do the due diligence on any indication that we receive that there's any type of noncompliance.
even if someone's called 100 times in a calendar year? Does that happen? I'm just curious. It does.
If it does, I couldn't speak to it because,
Okay.
again, I would protect the...
I'll back off. Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Chairman Carter. I hate to get back to this TVT, but we're all hearing lots of things as members of this committee. And you did, thank you for the good job you do. I know you got a huge agency, and I know this law is you're doing what the law says, and I'm not getting in there. But we're trying to figure out why some communities are losing revenue from this TVT and some are doing. And I guess this report you're going to get us will kind of show that. Have you looked into why some of these communities might? I've got some figures from one of my counties, such as Houston County, which is a vibrant, growing community, and they're losing revenue. And we're trying to, as legislators, trying to figure out why. Have you done any analysis? Have you gone in and audited auto dealerships and seen if they're doing the values right and calculating those and remitting the reports? I think I hear from some of my tax commissioners that might be some areas of possible fraud where some of these dealerships or used car dealerships are not calculating values right. Or can you talk to that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We currently don't have the resources available to be able to do a deep dive in that way. We are relying on our local tax commissioners to provide us that information because
but tax commissioners don't do titles anymore. Is that correct?
Actually,
could you explain that to me, how that works now too?
The processing occurs at the local level. If you are purchasing a vehicle, the titling and registration can be done electronically, but it can also be done manually at the county tag office. However, if it's done electronically, that is communicated and sent to the local tag office. The Gratis system is interfaced so that we see the final data that is put into the system, but that information is usually generated at the point of sale by the dealer and reviewed by the local tag office, and then the department is the administrator that overviews the totals and then makes sure that the funds coming to the state is accurate.
Well, my local tax commissioners, I think, are telling me they seem to be a little bit out of the loop as far as information or being able to analyze now what they did several years ago. I'm just trying to get my hands around that.
I'd be happy to speak with them about that because I'm not aware that they don't have the ability through their Gratis access to be able to do this scrutiny as well.
Okay, all right. Could I answer another question? Flipper, forest land, and I'm sorry, I didn't follow you when you were talking about it. So could you go back over there? Were you anticipating we need more funds for those counties this year, and it's going to be a budget shortfall, or what exactly you say?
Sure. If you look back at the budget summary, you'll notice that in the FY 2016 original budget, the forest land protection grant number was 14 million that was appropriated.
Right.
And then in the amended budget, it went up to 29 million.
Okay.
In the amended budget, an additional 15 million was authorized for us to distribute to the counties. And we immediately put that money right out the door as soon as we received it. We, based on 2017, 14 million again was appropriated for the original budget. All of that 14 million was dispersed in August. Becky, I think it was. In August, we put that money out, again, based on first come, first serve. But as of today, we still have $41 million in applications available to pay, subject to what the General Assembly appropriates.
So we're not appropriating adequate money for that program. Is that right? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out why we're not doing that.
Well, there's 7 million left in applications that were submitted from the year 2015, and 33, almost 34 million currently available to be paid out in 2016. And again, we can only pay what is subject to appropriation by the General Assembly and the governor.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Commissioner Riley, thank you for being here. I'm going to ask
My
you a
pleasure.
question. When I look at these things, I've learned to try to ask some questions that if I were to hand this to one of my constituents or they were looking at that, they would ask me, and I probably wouldn't be able to answer for them. So, and I know it's complex. I know that these items you have listed here are just kind of general. Not general, but fairly wide topics you have here. But for revenue processing, and here's what one of my constituents would be thinking, and I'm sure I'm totally off base. Chairman Martin, I'm sure, knows a lot more about this than I do, and is dealing with time. But 12 to 15 million for revenue processing. I mean, to me, that says that's the money processing the revenue that comes in. Then my constituent would say, okay, you've got the money. How does it cost $52 to $59 million? What's that about? Tax complaint. You've got the money. What are you doing with, it costs you $16 million to bring the money in. Why do you need another $59 million beyond that once you have it? What the heck are you doing with the other $59 million once you have the money to go in the general fund?
Thank you, Chairman Parsons, for that question. The other $59 million is to help those folks that are not fully compliant get compliant with the laws of the state. Those are all the ones that have underpayments or are subject to audit and review. And the greater bulk of the employees at the Department of Revenue are the ones that are assisting taxpayers become fully compliant. The revenue processing number are the folks that are just managing the systems that are automated, if you will.
Yeah.
The 59 million are the folks that are manually reviewing returns and helping taxpayers comply, whether it's sales tax, withholding, or income tax.
That's kind of what I thought, but it does though. It just seems like compared to the amount that it costs to bring the revenue in, and then it costs, exponentially more for all that. But anyway, I appreciate the answer. And here again, what I've learned to try to do is, because there's so many things in the appropriations process that we, over the years, just kind of look at. Not everybody, so I'm not blaming it, but I have, and okay. And then, but if a constituent then looks at some of this, why wouldn't you have asked that question? What's that all about? And that's kind of where my question comes from.
And thank you, Chairman Parsons. I think it's a valid question, and I think it's important that our taxpayers know that the department takes special efforts to make sure that every taxpayer is compliant. For every taxpayer that isn't compliant, that means the burden is greater on the rest. So the General Assembly has appropriated the monies to allow us to have revenue agents across the state assist taxpayers to make sure they pay their fair share, whether it's any one of those tax
Yeah.
streams that we administer.
So basically, you tell them, if your third cousin if he would comply with the law, and his third cousin, we wouldn't have this amount of appropriation we'd have to have.
If everyone complied 100% with our tax laws, yes, we would not need revenue agents
Nor
in.
corrections or law enforcement or anything else, right?
Thank you for that question.
Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I had two questions, if I can. Going back to the TAVT, my favorite four letters, just not. The counties, when they're saying they're short or they're tall, if you will, or over under, that's kind of a projected look at where they think they are in the economy, right? I mean, the bill that went forward said on a fiscal year basis, or maybe an ad valorem tax basis, I don't remember which, but one of those that we would make the greater state whole, and we would evaluate every year to move those levers to even it out, right? So if a county thought they were a little bit under, they would get their levered percentage up, so the next year would be corrected.
Except it's in an aggregate basis, Mr. Chairman. If the aggregate of all 159 counties' collections for a year is up, then the adjustment would be made, uniformly. So every county in 2016 was adjusted to the 44.5% collection rate based on the total collections, state and local together.
Okay, right, but when in comparing that to where they think they're supposed to be, it's a bit of a shot in the dark, because you're projecting how many cars you thought would have been sold in 2017.
Correct.
And the tax would have been collected, or how many people moved.
Correct.
So we think we did the best we could when we came up with the initial formula to lay it out at a picture in time.
The formula reflects an aggregate collection rate for the state as a whole and all 159 counties together.
But it was distributed. I mean, we didn't divide the amount by 159 and send it. I mean, Fulton County got their percentage of it based on what they were collecting in ad valorem and sales tax at the time.
No, the department makes an allocation every year of the total amount of TAVT based on the aggregate amount collected at the local and the state level. So each county is going to get, or did in 2016, get 44.5% of whatever was collected in their jurisdiction.
Okay, and that's why I've failed to get that, to be back to their jurisdiction.
Correct.
So I'm drawing that all back in now to say that whether you're getting more or less is somewhat of a projection of how many new cars are being bought versus how many cars are being kept.
That is correct.
I mean, if a county is changed, what they're getting over, if they're getting more than they thought they would have gotten in 2017 under the old system or less, it's probably because the buying patterns in that county changed one way or the other based on the new system. Because we all know now, if you buy a car once and you keep it for 4 or 5 or 6 years, that's where you get your tax savings at the state and at the county level. If you're in a county that trades a lot of cars, that money's going to go up. So I guess what I'm getting at is it not true? It's more of a function of how the residents in that county are buying and selling cars than it is the state did something.
That certainly is a factor.
That's what I was trying to get. And thank you for helping me get to the point of the activity in the county. Going back to Chairman Parsons' question, with the sheer fact that $59 million are being spent, I'm not questioning that. I mean, I would be curious to know how much of that's business and personal and in what specific areas you have it, but not for today. It speaks a little bit to the fact that as we down here talk about how complicated the federal tax law is, that ours is pretty complicated when almost a third of the revenue budget is having to be spent on helping people get compliant. Again, I'm not complaining about the job you're doing. I think it goes a lot, it says a lot about the tax laws we have, because some of that compliant issue is a taxpayer thinks this should be taxable or shouldn't be taxable, or I pay this much, and the department thinks another way. So we could clear some of that up if we wanted to take on take a big bite out of that elephant and do some comprehensive tax reform. Net zero, not revenue going one way or the other, but we could simplify that and help that $59 million. Wouldn't you could agree with that, or without putting you on the spot?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can absolutely speak to the fact that every new tax policy that is put into place in the state of Georgia comes with new education, new programming, new outreach, so that folks understand that there is something new that they must adhere to. So the more streams, I mean, we have a number of different revenue streams, whether it's sales tax, income tax, et cetera, TABT, we're going to have complications in compliance. And true, the more complicated the effort is, the greater the likelihood that there will be questions by our taxpayers and interactions that will be required by professionals at our department to assist them.
Last question. I know there's the time, and it might have been last year and it may be this year. When was the time that we were going to have an adjustment to the TABT rate? Has that passed? Or
that was 2015.
And it'll happen again in
2018.
Do you see that going up, down, or staying the same if you were looking in a crystal ball?
I really don't have any evidence to indicate that there would need to be a change at this time. As I said earlier, our focus right now is to look at the 2016 total collections to determine what the 2017 apportionment will be between the state and the locals based on the actual results for 2016.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got 3 questions, so if I talk real fast, it'll make it seem like not too much, maybe.
We can handle
Timber tax. I'm just asking another dumb question, but timber tax that's actually received by the counties.
That is correct.
Does the state get any of that?
No, it does not.
Okay, because I see a lot of discrepancy from county to county on that. The other thing was computers used to be furnished for each county office. Is that correct by the
For the tag and titling system?
Yes. Is that still happening? Everything?
Currently, we're all interconnected, and the DRIVES program contemplates a similar interconnectivity.
And the last question is, if I can find it here. Oh, do we still require everyone to file, or are we getting to a point that do we require everyone to file their taxes like automobile dealers, used car dealers? I had a big problem with people having to file by computer, and frankly, we've got parts of our county don't even have internet service or anything. So, I mean, is that still mandatory? Are you working with people that have that issue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We currently do not have any mandatory 100% filing of any of our tax types. Of course, it saves the taxpayers of the state 1/3 the cost to process electronically.
Well, maybe we ought to get some computers down there. I mean, some internet down there. It would save the state money. But, that'd be great. But at one time, there was actually a penalty or an additional cost if you filed by paper and not by computer. Is that still intact?
In certain tax types above a certain threshold of activity, yes. But in most cases, there is discretion for the commissioner to consider a waiver based on the hardships of the circumstance.
Very good. Thank you so much. You do a great job. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Dickey.
Thank you. I got one more question. I think that probably the only CPA in this room, and you would think, if the new federal administration were to change tax codes in Washington drastically sometime during 17, after this session's over, it would affect maybe Georgia state tax, because
It most certainly would affect Georgia tax.
Yeah. So could you speak to that, of what possibly could happen or would look like? We don't know what Washington's going to do, but the timing of it kind of concerns me.
Certainly, I'd be happy to give you my best observations as of today. Most of our income tax system is based directly on the federal tax system, with limited exceptions. And every year you do pass a bill that reconciles the federal government's tax strategy with, or reconciles Georgia tax law with the federal government, again with limited exceptions. Should there be a dramatic change at the federal level, the General Assembly of the state of Georgia would have to consider whether they would continue to mirror or base their tax strategy here in Georgia on a federal structure. There are some states currently that operate in an entirely separate tax strategy from the federal government. That would be up to the good members of the General Assembly in conjunction with the governor's office to determine the appropriate method should there be significant changes at the federal level. We have had, in certain circumstances, some tax law at the federal level implemented retroactively. And that requires, again, the General Assembly to consider legislation either to comply or mirror that federal strategy or deviate, depending on the will of the state. And the department will do our level best to stay as closely attuned to the activities that are happening at the federal level so that we can analyze as best we can real time and provide some insights to you and your colleagues on what we would see the implications might be.
Very good, thank you.
Is it not the norm that all the states mirror the federal government?
More states than not mirror the federal government, but not all. Of course, we have some states that have no income tax at all, and others that have a structure that's completely different, based on a different tax base than the federal government.
Does the federal government have a deadline for when they put out their updates?
I only wish, Madam Chair.
I get the complaints from my CPAs locally every year on how long it's taking for that update to pass here in the General Assembly, and so it's frustrating for them, it's frustrating for us, and Chairman Martin has a question now.
And thank you, Madam Chair. We completely appreciate that our folks are working right now on the reconciliation bill. We hope to have it available next week.
But you don't know it yet, really, until the feds come out with theirs, right?
Well, we're basing it on last year's congressional activity. Should something dramatic change that is retroactive, then we would either have to modify that bill as it goes through the legislative process or contemplate additional legislative action.
That's a great plan.
Again, based on the will of the General Assembly.
Sure. Chairman Martin.
I think Madam Chair is ready to go, so I'll be brief. You made the point I wanted to make. Unless Congress, unless the 115th Congress acts retroactively, we would have a chance as a state legislature in 2018 to do anything that is impactful for the 2017 tax year.
That is correct.
So unless they act retroactively, we're okay relative to our tax law, and we use their AGI.
Currently.
Okay.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? No questions. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our pleasure to be here.
Great job. Lots of good questions.
We'll get that information to you as quickly as possible.
Lots of great information.
And happiest of Happy New Year's.
And to you. All right. So I have a couple of announcements to make before we adjourn. The first one is that Chairman Pruitt has brought some snacks for us if we want to take some maybe on our way out for the walk home. And secondly is that our committee is having lunch in 245 from 12 to 1. So y'all are all welcome. All members are invited to join us. Fox Brothers, I think, for 80 people. So we have plenty for each of our members. Come and have seconds. And any other comments, questions? Meeting adjourned.